Hi, I'm Victoria Chandler. I'm the curator of collections here at Historic Arkansas Museum, and we today are in the quilt gallery. It's the Cape Gallery, which had our historic quilt show that's been up for almost the past 2 years, and we are deinstalling, or what we call striking, some of the quilts. How we kind of strike the quilt cases is that we have what we call suckers, and they're these, they're kind of, if you remember, I can't remember which Mission Impossible it is, but Tom Cruise takes suckers, and they're actually what we use, and adheres them to the cases, and so then we take each individual one off. They're connected with security screws, and so we take the screws out, get the suckers on there, and then lift them one by one and lay them on blankets so we can have them down. So this one, it weighs a couple hundred pounds, and so we enlisted a bunch of our co-workers in the education department to help us move the piece, and it required, I mean, it's really large once you take it out. And so we take the panel out slowly but surely. There's like rail systems inside the case, and so the panel kind of can slide down. It won't just collapse on the inside. And then once we get it out of the way with people walking around and holding it, we'll put sawhorses underneath so we can lay the quilt flat. We meticulously looked through to make sure we didn't have any pins in certain areas, kind of pinning quilt down. And we would take what we call bone file, which is, you often use them in archives for flipping through books so you don't have to touch things, and to separate the velcro. And this took a little slow process. It was myself and Carrie Voss, the curator of exhibits, with a couple other people assisting here and there, going through and deconnecting the velcro. And then very carefully, we took little scissors and snipped away all the threads that were sewn onto the quilt, and then pulled the panels out. We had to be very meticulous about this because often the thread we were using, we mimicked the similar color of the quilt, of the back of the quilt. And so these quilts are very old, and they've been used and loved and worn, and so there are lots of stray threads on the back, and so we just had to make sure what we were touching and pulling wasn't a historic part of the quilt, but the new piece of thread that we added. And then we would fold the quilt, fold it 3 or 4 times, and then walk it together to our quilt table, which is where we would roll the quilt. And we roll quilts because it's better long-term storage. When you fold a quilt, you'll notice there's crease marks that can come up, just like with clothing and everything. And so this prevents us having to, refold a quilt frequently, or any damage taking place. And we're going out into our holding area. Here we have a small collection space in the back, and that's where we'll store it temporarily until we're able to transport it to our collection site. So the quilt is a really unique quilt in the collection. It was made in the 1830s by enslaved individuals. And we only know this because it's the family, that's what the family told us when they donated the quilt. And that's what the family lore is. Often, people will claim that it's an enslaved made quilt. And there's really no way to verify that. Unless there's, like some written thing from the period that it talks about so-and-so made this quilt. Often, with this quilt, we looked at the family history to see if they owned if they owned individuals, and so we were able to identify that they did, in fact, and so it seems probable that if this had passed down for almost 200 years of history, it was probably true. This quilt was made for a wedding. Often quilts were made for celebrations or special occasions, so weddings, births, also deaths, baptisms, things like that. It's really unique because it's a chintz quilt, and chintz is a type of fabric that's printed. It was very popular in the early 19th century, very expensive, and so it was clearly used and gathered and saved for the specific purpose of making this quilt. And so it's really special for all those reasons, and we're really lucky to have it in the collection.